a jive vampire. Shake a foot, shake a foot.
On a scorching day in 1937, a fire tore through the Fox storage vaults with a temperature so high it melted steel reels in seconds. Within hours, 35 of Theda Bara's 43 films, nearly her entire life's work, were reduced to smoke. A woman once earning $4,000 a week in 1919, the second highest salary in Hollywood, was suddenly erased by flames no one could control. The tabloids called her Arab Death. The censors banned her movies in Ohio, Georgia, Kansas, and religious groups condemned her as a moral plague. Yet behind the manufactured myth, behind the studio-built lies about a Saharan temptress, was Theodosia Goodman, a quiet, book-loving girl from Cincinnati who watched an empire built from her image and then an empire burn it down. Tonight, we return to the moment the fire began, and the moment her real life disappeared. Welcome to the untold stories of Theda Bara. To dissect Theda Bara's downfall, we must begin with the machinery that created and destroyed her. In 1915, when A Fool There Was exploded across America, Fox launched an unprecedented publicity campaign. More than 300 newspapers printed the same fabricated biography, insisting she was born in the Sahara Desert, raised among occult rituals, and trained in forbidden arts. It was a calculated lie designed to turn a 29-year-old woman from Ohio into a supernatural commodity. The studio manufactured the myth. Society weaponized it. The first pressure point came from moral crusaders. By 1916, 3 state censorship boards, Ohio, Georgia, and Kansas, had either banned or attempted to ban her films, citing immorality, suicidal influence, and degradation. In Pittsburgh, the Welfare Board condemned sin outright, declaring it dangerous to public virtue. That year alone, Fox spent an estimated $50,000 fighting legal and censorship challenges, a staggering cost in the silent era. Then came the economic blow. When Theda left Fox in 1919 after refusing to renew her contract, she walked away from a salary of $4,000 per week, a figure higher than most male leads and exceeded only by Mary Pickford. But independence came at a price. Her 1,920 Broadway comeback, The Blue Flame, despite drawing over 2,000 audience members on opening night, was savaged by critics and collapsed after just 48 performances. Theda's image, once untouchable, had been shattered by expectations she could never escape. Finally, the ultimate sabotage wasn't human at all. In the 1937 Fox Vault fire, temperatures reached over 1,000 degrees Celsius, igniting nitrate film like gasoline. Out of 43 films, 35 were annihilated, leaving only fragments of a career that once dominated an entire decade. These weren't accidents. They were pressure points created by studios, society, commerce, and time colliding with surgical precision. Before the fire, before the bans, before the myth of the vamp, there was Theodosia Goodman, born the 29th of July, 1885, in Cincinnati, into a modest Jewish household on Lynn Street, surrounded not by deserts or temples, but by census records and the sound of her father's sewing machine. Her father, Bernard Goodman, earned roughly $15, $20 a week as a tailor, just enough to support 3 children and a wife who believed fiercely in education. Theda attended Woodward High School, where school archives show she participated in literary clubs and amateur theater, logging at least 12 student productions before graduation. She was not a prodigy. She was a girl who worked relentlessly. At age 19, she moved to New York with barely $100 saved, renting a small room in the West 42nds while auditioning for every touring company she could find. Between 1,905 and 1,913, she joined at least 6 regional theater troupes, each job paying between $7 and $12 per week, often barely enough for food and train fare. Those years, 8 long, unglamorous years, were shaped not by fame, but by rejection. But the psychological blueprint was already forming. A child from a quiet neighborhood, suddenly exposed to the brutal mathematics of survival. One role out of 50 auditions, one paycheck away from hunger, one critic's line capable of ending a season. These numbers etched themselves into her thinking, creating a woman both fiercely ambitious and silently afraid of becoming invisible. And invisibility, ironically, would become the greatest terror of her life long before Hollywood turned her into a creature of shadows. By 1915, Theodosia Goodman had vanished, replaced by a manufactured apparition named Theda Bara. Her rise was immediate and quantifiable. A Fool There Was earned nearly $3 million worldwide, an unprecedented figure for a silent feature. And Fox responded by locking her into a production schedule of 6 to 8 films per year. Between 1915 and 1919, she appeared in more than 40 films, a pace so extreme that studio records show she averaged 18-22 shooting days per picture, with only brief breaks for costume fittings and publicity sessions. She wasn't simply working, she was being consumed. Theda's salary reflected her meteoric ascent. By early 1919, Fox paid her $4,000 per week, equivalent to over $60,000 per week today, making her the second highest paid woman in the industry. During peak months, her fan mail exceeded 1,000 letters per day, and theaters routinely sold out screenings even in midweek afternoon slots. She became the face of an emerging cultural archetype, the vamp, a woman who weaponized sexuality, ambition, and silence. The image made millions, but the cost was personal. Because the image wasn't hers. Fox executives insisted she attend public events in exotic veils and embroidered robes, creating a fictional creature none of her friends recognized. She was forbidden to speak of Cincinnati, her real name, or her upbringing. Publicity staff fabricated a 20-page biography distributed to over 300 newspapers, claiming she had been born in the Sahara, educated in mysticism, and trained by desert priests. Every lie widened the gap between Theda and Theodosia, until even she admitted privately that the studio version of her life was more widely accepted than her actual history. And with the fame came hostility. During her 4-year reign, at least 3 state censorship boards banned or restricted her films. The Pittsburgh Welfare Board condemned her as a public threat. Georgia labeled one of her productions unfit for civilized audiences. Religious groups protested outside theaters, some carrying banners counting "the souls corrupted by the vamp." Reports from Fox legal archives note that the company spent tens of thousands of dollars per year defending her films against moral crusaders. Behind the spectacle, Theda lived in a starkly different world. While she appeared on screen in elaborate gowns, some weighing over 20 pounds, she returned home to a modest rented bungalow with only 2 full-time staff members, 1 cook and 1 maid. She slept irregularly, often starting days before sunrise and finishing near midnight. She once worked 14 consecutive days without a break, when Cleopatra, 1917, fell behind schedule, wearing costumes made of metal beads that reportedly scratched her skin raw. And despite being the center of every frame, she was increasingly isolated. Fox discouraged her from mingling with other stars to preserve the mystique. Theda Bara had everything: money, power, fame, command over audiences nationwide. But the woman beneath the veils had less and less, fewer friends, no privacy, no identity she could safely reveal. Her brilliance was quantified in box office numbers, her loneliness in the silence that waited when the cameras stopped rolling. The fall of Theda Bara did not arrive in a single blow. It came in layers: commercial miscalculations, cultural shifts, corporate betrayals, and finally a literal firestorm that wiped out nearly every trace of her life's work. Her collapse is one of the most quantifiable implosions in early Hollywood history, and every number tells a piece of the tragedy. The first fracture began in 1919, when Theda made the bold decision not to renew her Fox contract. She walked away from a guaranteed $4,000 per week, approximately $200,000 per year in silent era dollars, and well over $3 million per year by modern standards. It was a dramatic move, but also a plea for reinvention. After playing seductresses in nearly 40 films, she wanted roles with complexity, not caricature. However, the industry did not want Theodosia. It wanted the vamp. And the public had already internalized that persona so deeply that the actress herself could no longer rewrite her identity. The second fracture came swiftly. In 1920, Theda attempted a dramatic comeback on Broadway with The Blue Flame. Opening night drew over 2,000 spectators, many curious to see the woman behind the legend, but critics were merciless. Reviews in major papers ranked the play among the worst productions of the decade. It limped through 48 performances, a commercial survival but an artistic humiliation. Theda had hoped for legitimacy. Instead, she became the target of a cultural joke. For the first time since 1915, she experienced something she had feared since childhood: invisibility disguised as attention. By 1921, she made a third major shift marriage to director Charles Brabham, a relationship stable on the surface but divisive behind closed doors. Brabham was known to hold traditional views about women working, and though Theda was never publicly restricted, she appeared in only 3 feature films after the wedding. Her final screen appearance, The Unchastened Woman, 1925, grossed modestly, but failed to reignite her career. Offers dwindled sharply. By the time sound films arrived in 1927, producers no longer considered her bankable. She was 42, a difficult age in an era when actresses over 30 were often pushed into obscurity. But the most devastating fracture came not from critics or studios, but from a catastrophe that no one, least of all Theda, could have foreseen. On the 9th of July, 1937, at the Fox storage facility in Little Ferry, New Jersey, a nitrate explosion triggered a firestorm that reached temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius. Nitrate film ignites faster than gasoline, and within minutes the flames had destroyed more than 40,000 reels stored in the building. Among them were almost all of Theda Bara's films. Out of her known career of 43 features, 35 were completely obliterated. 3 survived only in fragments. Only 6 films remain intact today. This was not merely a fire, it was an erasure. Consider the mathematics of her loss. Over 80% of her performances vanished in a single afternoon. An archive built through over 10,000 hours of filming, hundreds of costumes, dozens of sets, and the labor of thousands of technicians, directors, designers, and extras. All of it gone. Her reign from 1915 to 1919, when she was one of the top 3 box office draws in America, was reduced to a handful of flickering images. Theda was not in New Jersey that day. She was in California, living quietly in a Spanish-style home in Beverly Hills. She learned of the fire through newspapers, each article listing the same numbers, the same casual brutality. Lost: Cleopatra 1917, Camille 1917, Salome 1918, 35 Bara films destroyed. For a woman who always feared becoming invisible, the event was more than a disaster. It confirmed her greatest psychological wound. She had believed that even if Hollywood abandoned her, her films would speak for her. But now they were gone, incinerated by a vault that had never been designed for preservation, only storage. In the following years, she attempted occasional returns to public life. She appeared on radio programs in the early 1930 seconds, giving interviews that combined humor and melancholy. When asked about her lost films, she would joke, "Perhaps it is better if some of them stay lost." But the numbers betrayed the truth. These were not selective losses. These were annihilations. Theda never made another film. By the early 1950 seconds, Theda began experiencing chronic abdominal pain. Doctors eventually diagnosed her with advanced stomach cancer. Over 14 months, she underwent repeated hospitalizations, losing weight steadily. She died on the 7th of April, 1955, at age 69. The official cause listed as carcinoma of the stomach with metastasis. At the time of her death, newspapers printed obituaries ranging from 200 to 400 words, most focusing on a single fact. She had once been the vamp. Very few mentioned her theatrical past, her fight with censorship boards, or the vault fire that destroyed her legacy. The woman whose image had once provoked national uproar exited the world quietly, with none of the spectacle that had defined her life. Theda Bara's collapse was not one tragedy, it was four. A career crushed by typecasting, a reputation shattered by critics, a legacy erased by fire, a woman forgotten by the industry she helped build. And all of it measured in numbers because even her downfall, like her fame, can be counted. Today, Theda Bara's legacy exists in fragments: exactly 6 surviving films, a handful of promotional stills, and a mythology built from more than 300 studio-engineered newspaper articles. Yet those fragments are powerful enough to cement her place as one of silent cinema's foundational icons. Between 1915 and 1919, she generated box office revenues exceeding $10 million, a staggering figure for the era, and helped define the vamp archetype that influenced actresses for decades. Scholars estimate that more than 80% of all silent-era femme fatale roles trace stylistic elements back to Bara's performances: the stillness, the stare, the theatrical languor that became her signature. Ironically, her disappearance only intensified her aura. When 35 of her 43 films were destroyed in the 1937 Vault Fire, she transformed from a star into a legend, a woman whose greatest works survive largely through rumor, memory, and second-hand testimonies. In modern film archives, she is cited as one of Hollywood's lost giants, not because she failed, but because history failed her. And yet, in every restored frame and every rediscovered photograph, Theda Bara still radiates the power that once terrified censors and captivated millions. Her legacy endures not through abundance, but through what remains after the flames. Theda Bara may have been erased, but she was never truly gone.